I'm Amy Odell, and welcome to the Back Row Podcast. My guest today is Sophie Gilbert. She is a staff writer at The Atlantic who won the 2024 National Magazine Award for Reviews and Criticism and was a finalist for the 2022 Pulitzer Prize in Criticism. She's also the author of the brilliant book, Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves, which you should go buy, and I will put a link in the show notes. Today, we are talking about Ryan Murphy's new show, All's Fair. Legal drama starring Kim Kardashian, Naomi Watts, Glenn Close, Sarah Paulson, and Niecy Nash. It has a 4% rating on Rotten Tomatoes last I checked, which is impressively low. And Sophie, your review in The Atlantic, which was a delicious, brilliant piece of work as always, was headlined, All's Fair is an atrocity. The Guardian gave it 0 stars, and reviews have been uniformly scathing. I loved your review, and I could not agree more with it. You basically describe it as like a feed that we would see on our phone of videos of outfits and just sort of tableaus of wealth that people tend to consume in rapid fashion on social media all the time. But how would you, Sophie, describe the show to someone who hasn't seen it and maybe hasn't even heard of it?
God, where to begin? Firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to talk with you about this show. All's Fair, it has a kind of soap opera style, I think, in that it seems like it's almost intentionally bad, hammy. It's a show ostensibly about 2 divorce lawyers and their colleague who leave a law firm 10 years ago, I think it flashes back to 2015, to set up their own woman-friendly corporate law divorce firm. It stars obviously Kim Kardashian as the insanely named Allura Grant and Naomi Watts as Liberty Ronson doing a British accent, which, it's not her best accent work. Niecy Nash is also playing the brilliantly named Emerald Green. But what to say? They don't really lawyer much. It really does feel 2015-esque in that there's a lot of kind of, you girl boss, get that bag kind of storylines going on, but nothing really lasts longer than a couple minutes. Everything is wrapped up very quickly, and it does just feel like this showcase for, like you said, tableaus of wealth, of diamonds, of like immaculate makeup and private jet scenes, and everyone's wearing matching Skims pajamas.
Oh, those were Skims pajamas. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Well, of course, because it seems to me like a venue for Kim Kardashian to be in a show that's not a reality show, but she can't act. So it's kind of just another version of her.
Yeah, she can't act, but also I think what feels really strange to me about the show is that not only can she not act, which, that's a flaw if you're trying to be a performer, but, lots of people can't act. I think the difference is that her whole brand is kind of blankness. Like, she has just become this avatar of sort of immobile, provocative expressionlessness for women. In all her photos. And she does it so well. And there's a kind of element of fascination to it, I think, when you see her in pictures or when she's on the red carpet, where she just gives you nothing. Like, it's like that meme with Dua Lipa, like, give us less. So there's nothing, there's no charisma, really. There is charisma because you're sort of fascinated by looking at her, but she's not giving you anything that you can latch onto as someone, as a spectator. And so in terms of putting that at the forefront of a television show, it's really interesting because acting does, unfortunately, require expression and characterization. And so you have her with this cast of women who are all giving these, like, wildly dissonant performances. Sarah Paulson, for example, playing the antagonist in the show, is really operatic, like really over the top hammy. Everyone is kind of doing different levels of performance as if to make up for the fact that Kim is just there being Kim, which I think is part of what makes it all so strange.
Yes, in your review, you wrote, on scripted television, she's much more vulnerable to someone else's camera angles and to a genre that rewards expression, not provocative blankness.
Yeah, I'd never really thought about her as the sort of avatar of this kind of professional blankness that we see so much on Instagram now. I think there was a picture from Paris Fashion Week of Zoe Kravitz and Charlie XCX and a bunch of other women just standing there with these completely neutral.
At the Saint Laurent show.
Yeah. Just
in windbreakers.
Yes, in windbreakers, and their faces were all just like numb almost, which is unusual, I think, because you do expect stars to sort of pose for the camera, and they were just giving nothing. But I think so much of that has come from Kim and how her face for some reason seems to work best when it's just completely neutral, when it's really kind of the backdrop almost for something else that's happening.
Yeah, it was striking to me in watching the show. I had never seen actually her reality show, and you had to watch it to write Girl on Girl. Can you take us back to the Kardashians? And I want you to talk about kind of what you said in your book about that show and and the cultural environment in which it came up and why it took off.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, before I go back all the way to the beginning, someone posted a picture of Kim's second wedding, I think, to the NBA player whose name I can't remember, Chris
Humphreys?
Kris Humphreys, that's the one. I'm bad at men's names, but they posted a video that was broadcast on Keeping Up from that wedding, and it's remarkable how different everyone looks. And that wasn't that long ago.
I saw that too.
Just to sort of see the way in which all these faces that we really have kind of lived with now for almost 2 decades have transformed in front of our eyes. But to go back even further, to go back to the beginning, I think Keeping Up debuted in 2007, I want to say. What is interesting about going back to revisit the first season is that they were supposed to be this kind of normal relative for reality television, but relatively normal Calabasas family. You know, the Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner, obviously back then was named Bruce, was then the celebrity. And I think the family was sort of built around Caitlyn's fame and Caitlyn's marriage to Kris. But what is interesting is that the house is kind of normal looking. It's sort of cozy. It's even a little bit chintzy. It feels like a recognizable bungalow. I mean, obviously they're wealthy, they're well off by the standards of most Americans, but it's nothing like the kind of palatial temples of wealth that we see now in Architectural Digest and on their Instagram, where they really have so much money and broadcast it. And so much about sort of the performance of wealth is intricately connected, I think, with their brand and with their fame and with their celebrity. They really were just sort of a relatively normal upper middle class family at that point. The selling point, I think, for Kim was that people did know her, firstly, because she'd been on Paris Hilton's reality show and had appeared on the red carpet next to her. And secondly, because of the sex tape that it has kind of murky provenance now, depending on who you're believing. But the sex tape that it emerged with Kim and Ray J.
Right. The sex tape. Yes. That's an important element of the story of Kim Kardashian, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's talk about plastic surgery. So this show, it really does feel like scrolling through your phone because you get the fashion moments. And Kim Kardashian actually told Vogue in an interview that she had her stylist do her own looks, which is not really how this usually works.
Yeah.
Usually you hire a costume designer who gets to interpret each character and dress each character. But Kim is just kind of saying, okay, well, I just want to look the way that I want to look. So she gets her own stylist, and we get to see her outfits. That's kind of an element of our feeds, many of us on a daily basis. But they also throw in medical misinformation and plastic surgery endorsement, which is, again, something that I see every day, whether I want to or not. What do you make of that?
I mean, there's a really great scene in the show where they're discussing plastic surgery, which, first of all, Ryan Murphy, who ostensibly created All's Fair, his second show that he ever produced and brought to television was Nip Tuck, which was quite a satirical and I want to say like quite critical look at the plastic surgery industry. So it's fascinating now that he has this show where the main characters are all sitting around discussing salmon sperm vaginal rejuvenation. Yeah. And there's a great scene in it where Glenn Close's character Dina says to Allura, Kim's character, like, don't you ever just want to sit in a hammock and read Jane Austen? And Kim's like, no. And she laughs.
Right.
It's like, no, what a preposterous idea when I could be having my like vulva rejuvenated with salmon sperm. Which I guess it's meant to be memed, and I think it's meant to be reproduced on everyone's Instagram 1,000 times, and you can take whichever side you want. But Kim's fame, the reason why she's in my book so much, I think, is because there's a chapter in the book about reality television and its influence on beauty and our current beauty standards. And Kim's fame, I think, has always been really intricately connected with the idea that, first of all, I mean, she almost single-handedly changed beauty standards away from this like very white, Eurocentric, skinny, kind of small heroin chic like Paris Hilton ideal in ways that made it much more acceptable, much more desirable to be curvy, to be fuller figured. So much of recent shifts in sort of body trends have been tied up with that. But also, I think there's this presumption with the family that there's nothing wrong with paying for beauty, and that if you can pay for beauty, you almost should, because why wouldn't you? So Kris Jenner, I think she obviously broadcast her facelift on an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, I want to say about a decade or so ago. Not her first facelift, obviously there have been facelifts since then. They've always been very transparent about the fact that they pay for a lot of their own physical upkeep, and they see that as part of the project of sort of celebrity. So much of, I think, our current trends in terms of the normalization of things like Botox and fillers, I mean, they've all come from the Kardashian-Jenner family. I think when Kylie Jenner got her lips plumped And she discussed it on an episode of Keeping Up. Google searches for lip injections went up something like 3,600% the next day.
Yeah.
They just have had an absolutely bonkers influence in terms of the kind of beauty that we fetishize as consumers and the kind that we want to then purchase for ourselves.
Yeah. And then they sell it back to us, not in the form of fillers, but in the form of lip kits or in the form of Skims.
Well, corsets, I mean, waist trainers, they were big on for a while. There have always been like lollipops, like flat tummy tea, I think was a big one that the Kardashians were all selling for a while on billboards in Times Square and stuff. I think I recently saw Kourtney had a lollipop that was it was like something to do with vitamins for your vagina. I didn't read too closely after that. But yeah, very much in terms of, building a business on this idea that beauty can and should be paid for.
Pooge, right? Isn't
Yeah,
that what
pooge.
Kourtney called? And then Gwyneth was like, oh, the more the merrier. Gwyneth, who also has promoted so much medical misinformation and so many products that will do little more for you than, cause you to have less money.
Yeah,
if
or
you buy
have diarrhea, I think, as the flat tummy tea.
Oh, that's
They're
what
basically laxatives in tea form, yeah.
I see. Okay. So they will sell kind of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not I think part of it's again part of this sort of
cigarettes, have they? I mean, maybe they draw the line at cigarettes or
there is like a real interesting shamelessness, I think, associated with the Kardashian brand, which is like, why should you feel ashamed of anything? Like, just own it, put your name on it, put your stamp on it, get the eyeballs, get the gaze, get the money, get the deals.
Well, in their defense, it has worked for them.
Yeah.
Because the attention is enormous. And it's kind of like we live in this moment where all attention can benefit you. I mean, look at Donald Trump.
Yeah. And it didn't always used to be that way. It's interesting to go back and remember that there did used to be scandals and people, I think, would be shamed. Whereas now we're just so used to this kind of relentless provocation, this relentless shamelessness, and this how powerful that can be when you just refuse to be shamed by anyone for anything.
Exactly. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is another example of that. So speaking of shamelessness, over the weekend, Kris Jenner had her 70th birthday party thrown at Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's $152 million Beverly Hills mansion. The photos for me were just inescapable over the weekend. It seemed to be tied to James Bond. It was like 007 themed, and Amazon Studios, of course, acquired the rights for, I think, $1 billion to James Bond, the franchise, earlier this year. Anyway, among all of the little scraps of content that I saw in my social media feeds over the weekend about this was one from Us Weekly. Ran an item with the headline that Kris Jenner's plastic surgeon was the most popular person at the party.
I mean, the party was bonkers on so many levels because I'm always thinking back to this moment almost 2 decades ago when Kris Jenner first emerged as like the momager. And she was really this figure of fun where it was like, she's pushing Kim to do Playboy and Kim doesn't really want to. But Kris is like, it'll be great for your career and the money is really good. This sort of figure that no one really took seriously. And then cut to now and she's just this Hollywood powerhouse to the point where every single celebrity really that you can name is at her 70th birthday party. I mean, Beyonce is there. Jeff Bezos is there. Mark Zuckerberg is there. But also, I mean, Prince Harry and Meghan, his wife, the Duchess of Sussex, were there, which it's fascinating. It says so much, I think, about power and status and the rise of this family and what they've come to exemplify. And not just money, but connections. And Kris, I think, is a really amazing networker. But yeah, like it was such a fascinating display of like celebrity muscle almost.
I find these events harder and harder to stomach because they're so ostentatious, so shameless, as you said. Yeah. And then you open the New York Times and it's like, people aren't getting their food stamps.
Yeah.
And people can't afford their healthcare. Like, it's just,
yeah,
it's like French Revolution vibes.
No, it really is. It's like the Great Gatsby themed gala that Trump threw at Mar-a-Lago, I think, a couple weekends ago, in the middle of obviously the government being shut down and people not eating and the government not being, like, people with federal jobs not being paid. It's the shamelessness. It's like back in the day, something like that might have been seen as a bad look in the middle of a country in crisis. But now I think no one cares. It's almost like people want to see the entertainment. And there was a theory about the Kardashians too, launching when they did in 2007 and then immediately being followed by the financial crisis in 2008. This idea that people didn't mind watching wealth. In fact, they almost enjoyed seeing wealth on television in the midst of difficult financial times because it offered this escapist alternative to reality. But the one thing that really struck me about that party, being British and thinking about Prince Harry, was he was wearing a poppy on his lapel. A poppy in England, in Great Britain, is something that we wear on the 11th of November to honour the veterans of the First World War, to remember the number of people that died in that war. And so there was something like really poignant to me almost about how he's at this party. He's this face like thunder. He seems to have been really reluctantly dragged along to this kind of really gaudy Hollywood display. And then he's wearing a poppy as if to signal that he's still trying to kind of keep that connection to Britain, to the royal family, to service almost.
Yeah, what is the sort of tone around his attendance over? You're in London and you're obviously British. So what was the tone over there around his attendance at the party? I mean, Meghan Markle is going back to acting. She has her Netflix show where she does her crafts and her recipes and whatever else and hangs out with her, friends, which in some cases I guess aren't even really her friends, but just people she has on the show. But what is like the feeling over there? Because it is interesting. You go from the royal family, you leave, you go to Montecito, and then you're now in sort of the heart of American oligarchy at this party.
Yeah, I think there's a real, so I would say quite an ugly tenor towards Meghan in the tabloid press, certainly in the UK, which has been rightly critiqued a lot. It's very hysterical, and in some ways it seems really, often racist in many ways, but also just like really unnecessary at this point. Like, just let them live their lives. But with
Right.
Harry, I don't know. There's something like very poignant about the fact that he seems to be homesick almost. And like missing his family and missing the things that are sort of quintessentially British and feeling fundamentally out of place as an outsider in this kind of new reality that he inhabits.
Let's go back to All's Fair, speaking of wealth porn.
Yeah.
So something I noticed about the show is that they seem to pepper the dialogue with just like these crazy financial figures. Like Kim tells one character that she can get 5% of a settlement, which would change her life because it would be $10 million. Another client is offered initially a $30 million settlement, and she thinks that's way too cheap. I don't know if you noticed, but they sort of linger on the designer handbags.
Yeah.
I felt like the camera liked those bags more than it liked the actresses in the show. Like it would so lovingly linger on these bags with logos.
Yeah.
Like a Chanel, obviously
Chanel
bag,
briefcase.
Gucci. Yeah, exactly. What did
It's
you
weird,
make of
right?
that?
Because
Yeah.
there's that moment in the first episode where Kim's husband, the football player, he gives her this incredibly enormous rock that supposedly was owned by Elizabeth Taylor, but it's in a Tiffany box. And you're like, what? I'm not sure that Tiffany is like regularly selling those kinds of quintessentially like very extremely famous jewels. But the branding, I mean, everything is branded. Everything that could have a label stamped on it is. First of all, it's just very in keeping with, I think, the style of the show and the stars. Definitely that's Kim's brand. But also, I wrote a piece about this earlier this year where we really do seem to be in this moment where TV is only interested in wealth. And
yes, that was an
wealth.
excellent piece. I'll put that in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
Yeah.
All these like Netflix series is about, usually starring Nicole Kidman, but shows like Sirens or, the Nantucket set beachy shows where they have these huge compounds and either someone dies or someone's husband goes missing. Or they're all starring these sort of sad, very slender white women, and they're all incredibly rich. I would say if it was just one or two or even 10 shows that were that way, that would be one thing. But if you look at something like And Just Like That, obviously has come to an end now, but it seemed to have a similar problem where its characters were so rich that they could not be related to on any human level. So it was all about storylines like dogs getting cancelled and, I don't know, ballet performances. But there's sort of nothing that the lay viewer can relate to. And it's just become almost like the defining aesthetic of TV now, where it's just wealth, wealth, wealth. You look at it, you ogle, you ogle. I don't know what we're supposed to do with it. Like envy, consume, buy, products ourselves. We obviously can't afford the Chanel. I wish I could afford a Chanel briefcase. But I guess the goal is to get us to buy cheaper versions of the things we see on screen.
Regarding the Chanel briefcases, I hear anecdotally from people who work in luxury fashion that there's some embarrassment or around kind of in some parts of the country, like carrying that stuff around. I want to say I heard that from someone in Seattle or San Francisco. Like rich people, they sort of save their conspicuous consumption acquisitions for parties where they're all together. So I wonder if the appeal of Kris Jenner's birthday party is they can all just get together and be as rich as they fucking want because everyone else there is rich and they're going to put the photos on social media, but it's not like they're out in the world where, they can be egged or
yeah, someone might rob them. Yeah.
It's sort of like these clients, these fashion clients, the very important clients who, brands, if they spend a certain amount of money, will fly them to the couture show or the ready-to-wear show with the expectation that they'll buy more clothes and then they have dinners for them and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, well, if they didn't have the dinners, they wouldn't have anywhere to wear these clothes because we're so casual now,
Yeah, that's fascinating. But I think it also does speak to the fact that so much of our social media is about like conspicuous consumption and showing off brands and labels and unboxing videos and stuff like that. And if you think of the show as just an extension of Instagram Reels, it makes sense that it would be so performative in its, use of labels.
Yeah, absolutely. Watching the show and Kim's lack of acting talent, I was reminded of my friend Jill Filipovich's essay that she wrote a while ago about the end of competence. And she was referring to politics, how we're increasingly elected people who, in America, who don't have experience, and how that is not necessarily a good thing. She wrote, competence and experience, it turns out, matter a lot in the actual doing of politics, but they seem to matter less and less in the electing of politicians.
Yeah.
Do you think we are reaching the end of cultural competence as well?
God, what a bleak thought. Jill's so brilliant. It's really funny, right? Because it's so much less about one's credentials for a job than being able to perform that job. I'm thinking about like Pete Hegseth being the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of War when he has like his resume is like Fox News host, weekend Fox News host. I mean, there's nothing in any normal administration that would make him even remotely suited for that job. But it doesn't matter since Trump just wants people who look the part. And the idea that would then bleed into our popular culture, it does make sense. I mean, to some extent, we've always had pop stars who maybe weren't like the best singers or the best musicians or the best songwriters, but who looked really good on camera. Certainly the shift towards MTV and music videos, that was a huge shift in terms of what kinds of qualities were important for you to make it in music. But yeah, I mean, this idea that you can now be a TV star or be an actress without needing to act or without even seeming wanting to try to act. Yeah, that feels fitting for right now in 2025.
Yeah. To play devil's advocate, to be fair to the folks who worked on this show, I mean, we see what's happening to, I guess we would call a television show longer form content.
Yeah.
Movies, of course, are just, they're almost becoming a niche interest, I think. And I hate to say that because I love movies, but when a movie opens in theaters, they almost never work or, open, as they say in the industry, unless they're kids' movies.
Yeah.
Ticket sales are down 40% from 10 years ago, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like movies are kind of going the way of opera. One could argue that it's just so hard for a television show or a movie to compete with a cell phone that the way forward is for someone like Ryan Murphy to be like, okay, well, I'll just take Kim Kardashian, like the person that people want to look at on their phones, and throw her in a TV show. And maybe that will, allow the show to work. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I sort of sympathize with that. And certainly I think All's Fair has been a tremendous hit so far. It's like it remains to be seen whether people just tuned in to see if it was as bad as they'd heard it was, or if they're actually genuinely compelled to keep watching. I think my problem is it just feels so cynical. It's a show supposedly about women and these kind of like pioneering female divorce lawyers out to support women, but it's co-created by 3 men. It's written almost entirely by men. I think there's 1 woman on the writers' team, and it really portrays this version of womanhood, and especially women at work, in a way that just feels so flat and so cliched. And like, yes, of course we do corporate law with like massive boobs out. Like, why would we not? Like, this is a feminist paradise. I was reading an interview with, I think it was Kim earlier, where she talked about how empowering it was because the show is about women and Ryan always casts women. Yes, he does cast women in his shows. That's amazing. He writes these roles for actors like Sarah Paulson that she might not be getting otherwise. I mean, she should be because she's a tremendous actress. But I don't know that the idea that someone is doing things with women necessarily makes it feminist. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, it's like, what is this show telling us about women and what we want and what our priorities are and how we engage with each other? Is that necessarily feminist? There's not a ton of lawyering that happens in the show. There's a lot of like talking about vaginas and boyfriends and men in sort of very cliched, old fashioned, like it just doesn't hit for me, the idea that it has to be feminist because it's necessarily a show about women and, they're lawyers and they're making money.
Oh, I don't think it's feminist. I would not call the show feminist. No, I don't think so. It's that girl bossy, one review, was it Vulture, called it girl boss nonsense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is this girl boss stuff back?
I think it's very alluring. It's the idea that you can sort of do whatever you want and make money. Which the original Girl Boss, I think, again, emerged out of the crater of the great financial crisis in 2008. So it makes sense now we're kind of in unstable financial times. Being altruistic and working collectively to make the world better for all people feels like a luxury at this point. It's much more about survival. And so it does make sense to me that you'd see these sort of much more individualistic avatars of money and success and wealth and fame emerge as our icons right now.
The show does run counter to the trad wife thing.
Yeah.
That we see on social media all the time.
Yeah, it's these two extremes. And I think there's something to do with like the TikTok algorithm and the way it really rewards extremity. Like attention really goes to the people who are making the videos that piss people off the most, I think, in lots of ways. But the two versions of womanhood that you get on social media right now, they really are, trad wife on the other hand, or like OnlyFans star, or kind of Instagram model on the other. And there's not a lot of space in between for most of the women who we know who are just living their lives and going to work and trying to, have families or not have families, or, just participate in normal life in a way that is not about catering, I think, always to this really old-fashioned idea of what men want.
Yeah, and those women probably don't have so much time to be on social media posting everything because it takes so much time. Oh my God. It's part of my job, and I struggle to find the time to make those videos. It takes forever. What do you make of the fashion on the show?
It's sort of feels like someone was asked to do the most hyper-feminine, hyper-sexualized version of corporate wear.
Yeah.
I think there's that one scene where Kim has a visible thong, just to really
Jean-Paul Gaultier vintage, yes.
Just to trigger those of us who have memories of that the first time round.
Well, that did go viral. And just to explain the context in which she wore it on the show, they have a meeting with a client and the husband that she's trying to divorce from. And they basically present their compromat against him, which is like he would go and visit escorts, I guess. And they were like, oh, here's a photo of the butt plug that you would use. Then, so they like slay the meeting, and then they have what they call a victory fizz, and they cheer. They have a champagne toast, and the camera pans around, and we see that Kim wasn't just wearing a tie, with her a little bit of midriff out. It was actually a thong, but continue.
I think that's really crucial context. And I am sympathetic to the idea that women shouldn't have to kind of de-sex themselves to participate in public life. And certainly with female political candidates, like the pantsuit and the idea that you have to dress in the most stereotypically masculine version of anything to be taken seriously is really old-fashioned. And I'm definitely amenable to any and each ways that we can find new ways to present ourselves at work. But there's something about the show, again, that feels almost provocative and almost trollish in the way that it's presenting the way that Kim, for example, would dress at work. It's not how any lawyer would dress. It's certainly not how any lawyer would dress for a meeting. I mean, is it how a lawyer should dress? I don't want to dive into that kind of worms, but this sort of hypersexualized, hyperfeminine, very corseted, very tailored version of workwear, it's sort of nothing we've really seen on screen for a while, I would say.
Yeah, I do feel like there's a story coming in the Wall Street Journal about how lawyers are having more fun with their fashion after watching All's Fair. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a trend piece that someone, or the style section, someone is going to do that trend piece. Mark my words. I don't think that lawyers really can get away with that stuff. I mean, fairly or not.
It's funny as a journalist because whenever people portray female journalists on screen, there's like a trope where either someone did a meme once where it's like female journalists on screen are always like sex magnets trying to seduce someone for a story, or they exclusively shop at Talbots. So I'm trying to remember that movie Spotlight where, Rachel McAdams' character just wore like khakis the whole way through.
Yes.
It's something we all struggle with in different professions. I'm not sure that it's about getting it right in All's Fair as much as it's about trying to, again, create this very enticing visual tableau that we cannot look away from.
Yeah, but this is happening with television more and more. I mean, All's Fair is just kind of piling on, really, because look at Emily in Paris.
Yeah.
Like the way they dress on that show, it's so fun to watch. And I do enjoy that show, even though it's ridiculous. But it's just fun, and it lets you kind of turn off your brain. Or if you look at The Devil Wears Prada 2, even The Devil Wears Prada 1.
Yeah.
It's this sort of ridiculous way of dressing that doesn't translate to the real world. But yeah, it's something that you can look at and talk about.
Yeah, it's very memeable. And it's supposed to be replicated, I think. We're supposed to take screenshots and post them and comment. It's supposed to live on and far beyond the way that we originally consume it, I think.
Yeah, it has to give people on the internet like me and you stuff to talk about.
To look out, to dissect, yeah.
But it does drive me crazy when I'm watching. I mean, I don't think you can totally compare All's Fair to And Just Like That, just only because And Just Like That used to be a great show, which was Sex and the City, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
revolutionary for its time. So I think people were really disappointed to see that the show that they loved, that they thought was revolutionary and new and great, became this, very diminished satirization of itself.
Yeah.
And so All's Fair, it's brand new, so it has no history to make us sad. So I
No.
think it can get away with the fashion for that reason in a way that And Just Like That didn't. But when I was watching And Just Like That, it was just like they missed athleisure entirely, the show. It's
Yeah.
like, because nobody wears that stuff. Like, I felt like And Just Like That needed a little bit more reality.
Yeah. Some stealth wealth, some of that Succession, like,
I mean, do you think that that's true? Like, is that fair to say? Did you have that thought?
I think it wasn't going for reality in any sense. And in some ways, the original
No.
show didn't either. I think the fascinating thing to me, and I really want to know what you think about this, that All's Fair and Just Like That have in common is hats. Like, what's going on with the hats? Oh my God. Niecy Nash's character has like 10 different fedoras per episode. There's so many hats. And then I remember the last season of And Just Like That, Carrie had a hat that literally looked like she was wearing a laundry hamper on her head. It was this kind of like huge gingham straw. You probably know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 But like, what's happening with the hats? Why is everyone trying to make hats happen?
I feel like I should have an answer, but I don't know, because I don't see people wearing hats. Like, I don't think this is a trend. I think it's just eye candy, I guess. I know in Naomi Watts, when she goes to New York, and is it the first episode of All's Fair? Because she's meeting a client who's sort of locking herself up in her townhouse in Manhattan and trying to figure out, how she can get out with the jewels because her husband's not going to give her money. She's dressed, it's almost detective-like with her sort of camel-colored cape and a matching fedora. Yeah. But I felt like Naomi Watts really drew the short straw with the fashion, because her fashion was really normal compared to the others, which is not to say that it was normal. But there is a scene where she goes to talk to her boyfriend, and he's playing basketball, and she's wearing something very plain, a tunic top and jeans. And he was wearing just like a normal thing that you would wear to play basketball. And like nothing else in the show is normal.
Yeah.
But that was like probably some of the most genuine emotion in the whole show. Because like there is a scene where we flash back to Kim Kardashian's wedding day with her husband, who's that football player, who's sort of an AI version of himself.
Yeah.
And it has like all the chemistry of a pharmaceutical commercial.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Like Naomi Watts' character is supposed to be the sort of stand-in for every woman, where we can't really see ourselves in anyone else, but we can maybe identify a little bit with her. And she I mean, obviously the most incredible actress. It's weird. It's fundamentally weird to see her be so stilted in this scene, like with that line when they're about to get the jewels and put them, she's like, grab those Goyard bags and let's start stuffing. I'm like, what is happening? It's just so strange. But no, she doesn't get the big flashy outfits. I don't think she has enough hats.
Did you see, though, that they signed on to the show having not read the script? That's what Ryan Murphy said. Yeah. Because I was like, well, how could they read this and be like, oh, this is what's next for me? Yeah. So you ask in your Atlantic review if the show portends the end of culture as we know it, and what does Ryan Murphy really think about women? And I would love for you to answer those questions. Does this portend the end of culture as we know it? And what does Ryan Murphy really think about women, do you think, based on this show and his recent television canon in general?
Yeah. I mean, does it portend the end of culture as we know it? I think the shift that I'm seeing is that for a lot of us now, culture is not what we watch at the movies or on TV. It's what's on our phones. That's mass culture. That's where mainstream culture is. It's what, it's how people connect. It sort of provides our shared lingo. The TV shows that we watch, I mean, even ones that it feels like everyone's talking about, like The Bear or The Pit, they're much more atomized. They reach far fewer people than TV shows, I don't know, in the 70s used to, where, I don't know, like 20 million people would watch an episode of MASH collectively, and it would be this experience that everyone was in together. So does the show sort of represent that shift? Probably, yes. But culture is always going to survive. It may not be the dominant form of entertainment that people talk about and experience. And in terms of Ryan Murphy, I've been trying to figure this out. When I was writing this review, I read so many pieces about him. I read an amazing New Yorker profile by Emily Nussbaum from a few years ago. I read academic papers about Nip Tuck. I was really, really trying to get to a cohesive theory of Ryan Murphy, and I just could not find one. I think he is a bit of a troll. I think he thinks that, again, in this sort of Trumpian and Kardashian manner, he thinks that pissing people off and getting attention that way is its own form of reward. But also, he is someone who has shown the desire and the ability to make really thoughtful, smart, compelling television. Like the season of American Crime Story about O.J. Simpson was really extraordinary and very thoughtful, I would say, and like very almost sensitive for a Ryan Murphy show. In terms of women, he loves to portray us as divas, as kind of grotesques almost, like women past our prime or women feuding, competing with each other, scrapping for power. It's not always a flattering portrayal, but he does have this fascination with women as a subject. The way in which he portrays us on screen is I cannot make out where it comes from, whether he likes women. I don't see a lot of myself in his characters. I don't see a lot of the women I know in his characters. And so it does feel like this sort of caricatured, very hyper stylized version of womanhood that is always in his shows. But yeah, in terms of having a unified theory, I could not get my brain together on that one.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the women in his shows are just what he is around.
Oh,
Maybe
God.
I mean, just
That's a
like
bleak
maybe
thought.
that's his bubble because he's super rich. He's been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
He got Kim Kardashian to do the show because like they know each other.
Yeah.
He was probably at Kris Jenner's party. I don't remember seeing his photo, but maybe he wasn't wearing the most fabulous outfit, so I missed it. What do you make of the subjects that he picks? He does so many shows I can't, and I don't watch them, I'm going to admit, for the most part. But he did the Capote and the Swans.
Yeah.
He did that. And then he has the next big one that he has is Love Story about Carolyn Bessette and JFK Jr.'s romance.
He also has one about an STD that makes people beautiful. Sorry.
Oh, he does.
He does. That's coming next year. No, he does. I think that's coming to Netflix next year. But yeah, Love Story. I mean, he's fascinated with these kind of tabloid touch points, these cornerstones of American history, like obviously the Bill Clinton impeachment, the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, these moments that seem to say something about the national character. I swore off his shows a while back. I think it was during one of the American Horror Story seasons where it just got too much. It felt really uncomfortable to watch. And I'm not saying that as someone who's particularly queasy, but there's sometimes just so much violence and so much, especially sexual violence, that for me, I think is always a hard thing to watch on screen. I think sexual violence is not that you can't necessarily portray it, but there has to be a good reason for doing it. And with him, it always does feel, like I said, just so much about provoking people and pissing people off and getting a reaction. I think that's part of what he thinks his art is about.
Which is just like the Kardashians.
Yeah. So it does make
way.
sense that they would form this like fruitful partnership.
That they would like each other so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Since the reviews have been so uniformly dire, they seem to be leaning into, the people who worked on the show, I should say, seem to be just leaning into how bad it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this, but Kim Kardashian posted on Instagram a carousel of photos, including her kind of doing the promotional events, wearing those clothes that she wore on all those red carpets, which were absolutely inescapable. I was like so sick of seeing that red carpet tour.
Yeah.
Very effective promotion, though, because we all knew about All's Fair from all those photos. But anyway, so she posts this carousel, and included in the carousel is comments like social media, tweets, whatever, about the show. And one of them said, "Some of the worst acting I've ever seen in my life, alongside the most predictable storylines and the most ridiculous styling. I'm obsessed and I need 14 seasons." Yeah. She also quoted Ed Power's Daily Telegraph review, which said Ryan Murphy is the high priest of tacky, tasteless television, and this year he has outdone himself. So she posted that, and her caption was, "Have you tuned into the most critically acclaimed show of the year?"
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's funny.
Yeah.
Like, that's really funny. So they're just like leaning into it.
No, I mean, if you can contrast it with Sydney Sweeney's Instagram post about her movie Christie tanking at the box office, which was much more defensive and like, defending the movie is something that was really important to her. Kim is absolutely owning the fact that the show is terrible. And in some ways, I do think it was intended to be terrible. I mean, I do genuinely do not think you write lines as bad as the lines in the show, unless you're going for bad as your like dominant motif, your style. I mean, it's just, there does feel like there's intentionality in how terrible it is. And all of it feels constructed in a way that is intended to keep us watching. And if we're watching because it's bad, I don't think they really care, as long as as we're watching, talking about it, discussing it, and posting our clips.
I know people are theorizing that they tried to make it this bad. I just can't imagine. Like, you and I write books that go get reviewed. Like, I just can't imagine as an author being like, I'm going to make this so bad. Like 50 Shades of Grey. Like, I don't think E.L. James was sitting there thinking, I'm going to make this so bad that it just gets the worst reviews.
I mean, John Robin Bates, who is one of the co-creators, he's a 2-time Pulitzer finalist. Like,
yes,
his play,
I read
The Desert
was
Cities.
In your review that I read that, I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen other Desert Cities. It's a gorgeous play. Like, you cannot tell me that someone who has the capacity to write that well is then doing lines about like stuff those Goyard bags without a degree of archness. I think, like, I just feel like the show, considering the people and the credentials and the award nominees that are involved in the show, like, it feels like it is bad on purpose. It's bad for a reason. And if it's not, they can certainly justify it as so, and we'll never know the difference.
Yeah, I just assumed that it was like network notes, how like network executives can like ruin things that are good. Like, I talked in Gwen at the biography about View from the Top, which is probably her worst movie. And it's fascinating to watch because it came out right after she won her Oscar, or she filmed it right after she won her Oscar, and then it was delayed because of 9/11, et cetera. But then it came out and people are like, what happened? Like, she's talented. How did this happen? But the movie, like, it started out really good.
Yeah.
And it just got rewritten and rewritten and rewritten until it was terrible and unrecognizable. But it wasn't her fault.
So it's possible that the show was better, and then there was someone who was just like, more fireplaces, because there's so many fireplaces in the show.
So many fireplaces. Thank you.
Jesus Christ, this is set in LA, and every scene has a roaring fire in the background. Like, maybe it's taking place in an alternate version of hell. I don't know, but I would love to know what the notes would have been. Like, more boobs, more fire. It's really strange.
A friend of mine who's a TV writer was like, at the end of the first episode, I think it's the end of the first episode, Teyana Taylor and Kim's soon-to-be ex-husband, Chase, are making out. And this TV writer friend of mine was like, the sex scenes aren't even hot.
No.
Yeah.
I know. And with two extremely hot people as well, it's just like,
yeah,
they're like Barbie and Kendall's, like, being smushed together. There's no chemistry.
Yeah, it was so confusing. Okay. So your book, Girl and Girl, it sort of takes a look at 90s and aughts culture in a totally new way. And reading the book, I felt like, wow, I was sleepwalking through my adolescence, because you shine a light on Britney Spears, Janet Jackson, the Kardashians, like all of these things, that American Pie. I just wasn't thinking about the extraordinary sexism and sexualization and misogyny wrapped up in all of these cultural products that defined my teenager years. What was the most surprising thing to you researching that book?
The reason why I wrote the book is because I was sleepwalking through it too. I mean, there were definitely moments in the 2000s, I think, when things made me uncomfortable. I remember like sending drunk emails to Perez Hilton being like, why are you so mean? So clearly there was like some part of me that was sort of aware that what he was doing was very, very problematic. But it's really hard to see things clearly when you're in the middle of them. There were two things that made me gasp in my research. And one was when I realized that Mike Fleiss, the creator of The Bachelor, Heidi Fleiss's cousin, also produced the Hostel movies, really like highly sexual violence kind of torture porn series. That it just seemed too on the nose almost. There was two images I found that really stand out. One was an American Apparel ad from 2010, I think, where the photographer had piled female models in underwear on top of each other in a human pyramid to emulate their Abu Ghraib photos obviously the Abu Ghraib was the Iraqi war prison where prisoners were tortured by American soldiers. And when those photos emerged, they were an astonishing scandal. It was like a real kind of atrocity that everyone could see. And the fact that a photographer for a major brand had decided to copy it just seemed to say a lot about fashion, and I guess like male sexual dominance as the real theme of kind of fashion's gaze throughout the 2000s. But there was another photograph. It was a Clinique ad for dramatically different moisturizer, that yellow moisturizer that I think everyone has owned at one point or another. Okay. And it was just a woman's face, and the moisturizer was dashed across the front of it to look as if someone had just ejaculated on her face. It was so kind of off-brand, I would say, for Clinique, but very much in keeping with this style of fashion photography, and certainly like advertisements in that moment, which were very, edgy, all about, again, being provocation and getting people to talk about them by being annoyed.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about Terry Richardson, which was great to sort of go back and really look at his impact. and
Yeah.
his influence, which I think people have kind of forgotten about. I hate to say it. Or, maybe a lot of people are just ignoring it. Maybe they haven't forgotten, but they don't want to revisit it because they worked with him or, whatever it may have been.
think Condé Nast finally cut ties with him in 2017 after he'd had this, dozens of models come forward to say that they'd been coerced into sexual activity with him during shoots or, really, really gross abusive behavior. And it took a long time. There had been people speaking out for years and years and years. But going back to look at his coffee table book, Terry World, it was all right there. It was all there in the book. Like he's standing there with passed out models, holding them by the hair while someone else is giving him a blowjob. Like he's choking models with his penis on camera in a coffee table book that was in an art gallery in Soho. And lots of celebrities went to they went to the premiere and they stood and they looked at these pictures of his penis. Everyone was being told were art. I think so much of that was sort of the fundamental question for the book for me. Like, why were we persuaded that that was all normal?
Yeah, it was crazy and it is crazy. And I'm so glad that you wrote about that at such length. And fashion is, obviously, a lot of my listeners are fashion folks. Fashion really is a big, big part of the book. And you made me think about it in a way I hadn't really thought about it before, and particularly not when I was living through it. And with like Kate Moss and all the ways that she was sexualized when she was saying, I'm not comfortable. But then she, quote unquote, had to do it for her career. I mean, it's just terrible.
Yeah. Just all these images that are in museums now because they're such a fundamental, like they really captured shifts in the zeitgeist better than anything else. And they've become part of our visual history. And then you find out that she was coerced. She was a 16-year-old and she was coerced into taking her top off and kind of bullied by the photographer. And it doesn't lessen what the images mean or what they stood for. But I think it's important for us all to just have the context. It doesn't mean anything has to be cancelled. And I always say this over and over with the book. Like, if you love American Pie, if you love Housewives, pleasure is hard to come by in this life. Keep whatever you want for your leisure time. It's more just about understanding the framework, I think, of power and dominance, and certainly of male sexual dominance that was behind so much of the culture of this.
Yeah, so the Kate Moss photo you're talking about specifically was from
The Face. It was the cover of The Face. I think it was 1990 or 1991, and it was called, the headline was Summer of Love. It was shot by Corinne Day, I want to say. I've been reading Tina Brown's Vanity Fair diaries, and there seemed to be this real desire at the end of the 80s to find something new, like to find this new mode of something that would be fresher than the 80s. It would sort of present this whole novel way of dressing, of appearing, of feeling. And the Summer of Love cover, it really captured so much of that. It was like, no more power suits, no more supermodels, no more, like, we will give you this sort of topless teenager wearing, a string of beads and a bikini on the beach in England. And it's going to signify so much about what's coming. And it did, unfortunately, but not a lot of it was necessarily positive.
Last thing, Lily Allen's new album. It's so good.
It's so good.
I just want you to talk about it.
I haven't been able to stop listening to it.
Same. It's like poetry. I'm like, this is art. I can't remember the last time I listened to a pop album.
Yeah.
And I was like, a new one. And I was like, this is art.
It tells a story start to finish in a way that not many pop albums have recently, where it's almost like a self-contained mode of storytelling, like a play or an opera. You listen to it from the beginning and you realize that you're learning the story of what went wrong in her marriage. But I don't know, have you read Heartburn by Nora Ephron?
Yeah.
So Heartburn was it's always called Thinly Disguised, but it was basically the novelized version of the breakdown of Nora Ephron's marriage to Carl Bernstein when she found out while pregnant that he was having an affair with someone else, and then he left her, and then she wrote her heartbreak into this novel. And it's an extraordinary novel. It's so funny. I don't know how she's able to be so funny about the worst thing that ever happened to her, but also when it came out, she was excoriated for writing what people saw as this way too open exposure of her marriage. I mean, I think Leon Wieseltier wrote a piece in Vanity Fair saying that it was tantamount to child abuse because she was setting up her kids by exposing the truth of what had happened in their parents' marriage. And there was such a visceral and really, I think, furious reaction to the idea that a woman would try to take back power after heartbreak by claiming her version of the truth. And I think in listening to Lily Allen, like, it's so much the same. That last song where I think it's called Let Him Win or Let You Win. And the whole song is about how she will only be able to survive this if she is able to turn it into art. And if she is able to tell her side of the story, and if she can do what she does best, which is like make music about the things that she is living through. It's such a gorgeous song, but I think the same kind of questions have come up around the album. Like, is she revealing too much? Is she being fair? Is she ruining her husband's, like her ex-husband David Harbour's career right before his Stranger Things press tour? Like all the same questions that we've always been asking whenever a woman dares to tell the truth about things that have happened to her. And her voice is such a good contrast with the real darkness of the themes, but the bravery, I think, in doing it is really amazing.
Yeah. Does it say anything to you about the fact that it's coming out at this moment in time? Is there anything to draw from
Right
that?
before the Stranger Things press tour.
Not only that, but I don't know, like just given Trump,
Yeah.
and like if the Me Too movement was in part a reaction to that,
Yeah.
I think that's been kind of the prevailing wisdom in research, right? That, we had this guy in the White House bragging about grabbing women
Yeah.
by the what, and then we had Me Too as a reaction to that, and now I don't know, culture kind of flipped back after that in 2020 and the pandemic. I'm just curious if there's anything to this coming out at this particular time.
I mean, I
And it being
definitely.
so popular. Like, I mean, I've seen so many just reels or TikToks of women just filming themselves listening to the album in astonishment. You sort of clutch your chest as you listen to it. It's astonishing what she went through and how she articulates it.
Did you see that? I think it was an Onion meme where it was like, woman who has never been cheated on or betrayed feels personally spoken to by Lily Allen's album. But there's a lot of that, I think, where it is, because it's so raw and because it's so truthful, it does connect with versions of things that we've all experienced, even if they're not exactly the same. Like ways of being gaslit or ways of being lied to or ways of feeling manipulated by someone we've trusted. I mean, it's all there. I think the thing that was most fascinating to me, and I'm still waiting for someone to write the kind of definitive piece on this, is the way she talks about not ethical, not monogamy, and how it really is kind of presented to her almost as an ultimatum in what I would say is a very non-ethical way, where he's like, oh, you've gone to London to be in this play? Well, I'm going to have to fuck other people because like that's just what I need to do. And so she goes along with it and she tries really hard and she sets up these parameters, and then he still can't keep to them in the version, I should say, in the version of the story that is on the album, because she said that only bits of it, it's all a kind of story about bits of it are true and bits of it might not be. But yeah, just the ways in which it portrays something that I think has been written about a lot and talked about a lot of late, the fact that she was sort of fearless enough to again, like be very, very truthful about the way that it felt to her in a way that is sort of contrary to dominant narratives. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. It was great. You should write that piece.
I've got other things.
I know. I'm sure you're super busy. There's so many things to write about.
No.
Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the pod. The book is Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. And I will put the link in the show notes, guys. Go buy it. It is so, so excellent. It's one of the best books I've read in a while, genuinely. And I'm so happy to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.